broadcasting live from Fort Detrick, Maryland. It's Radio Free Sriracha Boy, and I guess you can say it's really been one for the history books. So
there's things and they're happening.
Yeah, so I guess we're gonna talk about that stuff, and try to put it in perspective. We've been calling economic collapse for, I guess, about half a year at this point, and now that it seems like it's happening, I gotta say I'm actually gonna turn around and go the other direction. I don't think this is the full economic collapse, and of course we got the coronavirus, which
we should probably introduce ourselves first.
Oh yeah, sorry, I'm Bang Bang Duck. With me is Alita, and how would you like to be known?
Just call me Falcon, because that's the name I've usually
Falcon.
used.
Yeah. So we got a show for you this evening. So what's the quarantine like, and what's the disease situation in your next to the woods?
I mean, so far, nothing's really been happening here yet. Of course, it's a pandemic, so all people can really do is wait.
Yeah. Up here in Montana, we've been finding new reasons to panic long before we even had the first recorded case in the state. I suppose that's good and bad in the sense that the governor actually declared a state of emergency before there were any confirmed cases. So I guess you can say we're, on the ball about this one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. In California, it hasn't hit us yet, or we don't know if it's hit us yet. California tends to be like competent, but in a Democrat way, where they're like what congressional Democrats wish they could be, which is, the California government doesn't seem to be very interested in actually helping people, but they are very interested in looking busy and very interested in putting out their own programs.
They can be right wing without having to take any of the responsibility.
Yeah, pretty much. So we had 2 black days this week, Black Monday and Black Thursday, and it's probably going to be another Black Monday next Monday,
I do like how quickly those Wikipedia articles just were summoned into existence.
Oh yeah,
Wikipedia editors are definitely on the ball this week.
Absolutely. I mean, what a week to be a Wikipedia editor. If you look on the should have screenshotted the stuff in the news. It's like the global. It's like coronavirus is declared a pandemic. The Dow Jones crashes. Over 1,000 deaths in Italy. Like it's intense.
Mm-hmm.
And to be honest, I think that those numbers are probably lowballing it. Those are probably numbers that are people who are like, it's of people, as I understand it. Those are numbers of people who have the coronavirus, die of the coronavirus, and it's detected. You know what I mean? Like they do.
How many people have died?
It's official, confirmed, and it's right now things are just starting. So
yeah.
What's interesting about this one is the very long incubation period for coronavirus, and particularly this strain. I think it's almost 3 weeks before people start to show symptoms.
Yeah.
So people can catch it,
symptomatic,
and start spreading it around to people for weeks, and so it's got this incredible transmission possibility unless you detect it very, very quickly.
What a great, as far as viruses go, what a great survival mechanism, right? Because the more intense the symptoms, that means the more intense the immune system is working, the harder the immune system is working.
Mm-hmm.
So the coronavirus has figured out how to be asymptomatic in kids and young people.
Yeah, I do wonder exactly about the specific mechanism going on there, obviously, because that's a very, biologically unusual thing for disease.
Oh, don't red pill us.
Well, I'm not even saying from a conspiracy perspective, just from a purely medical perspective. The classic big pandemic, the Spanish flu, was so nasty because part of the lethality came from what's called a cytokine storm, which is basically the immune system going into overdrive and causing damage, which is why it was so nasty in younger people. And so I wonder what the specific biological effects here that cause it to be very minimally lethal in younger people, but purely scaling up.
Yeah, it's a good it's a good point. It's interesting.
Yeah, an interesting case for epidemiologists to study.
Yeah. It looks.
What I think is interesting is how the segmented nature of the global market has just opened up these really huge fissures into what is the consensus about how the way we do things in this late capitalist epoch. And some states are handling it very well, others are not.
Yeah, something that I talked about this a bit before we started, but I think it's very revealing in the US, and it's going to be revealing in the upcoming, I'd say, like, month or two, that the US has rather specifically and aggressively annihilated any ability for collective action, any ability for communal action, any just any like kind of capability to do anything at scale, because those mechanisms obviously could be used even in a minor way against capital. And so, of course, the United States has annihilated them all, and now we're going to see the results because, specifically, of course, a pandemic is something that requires collective action to deal with. And yeah, any capability for that's just been completely annihilated in the US.
Yeah, man. It's truly amazing the people who have taken the mask off completely about how they're more concerned about the effects that the panic around coronavirus is having on the global market than they are about the lives of hundreds of thousands or millions of people.
Yeah, and it is at this point it is a disease that, I mean, not to get too conspiratorial, but I feel like these ruling governments, at least on some level, are like excited about the prospect of having the pensioners die off, because sort of there's, if you go a little bit behind the scenes for the past couple of years, discussion of like pension reform has been a major issue because the pension systems that we have set up don't function in the way that they should, or at the scale they need to. And so I have this horrible feeling that, like the Trump administration and the Johnson administration especially are very happy with the idea that a lot of older people are going to suffer from a very potentially fatal disease.
Yep, and I think it's the dark side of a lot of this crap we've been seeing constantly put in these puff pieces. I remember reading one article that was about basically the thrust was that retirement is going to have to be abolished as a concept because people are living too long, but that's okay. We just need to adjust our expectations and continue to find ways to have people valorize their labor until they literally are in the grave.
Yeah.
And also, I've seen specifically, I'm not exactly sure where it was, but I have seen a British article specifically basically saying explicitly that coronavirus will be good because it'll kill a bunch of old people and it's cheaper that way. So it's not even in all cases like behind the scenes passive. I've already seen fairly serious economic articles written that are just like, yeah, it's going to just annihilate old people, which is great because it'll be cheap. And and that was of course from a British source, because the British are the only country I think that's decided to do an even better job about handling this than the United States, which just the proper British term is, of course, just bloody fucking legends, just deciding to say, fuck it, yeah, get the virus, it's good, let's do it. Just amazing.
That's the official line of the Johnson government, is that they're going to try to spread it as rapidly to as many people as possible and build up herd immunity.
That's probably, it's been said before, but every dipshit online saying they're black-pilled, pathetic. If you want to be truly black-pilled, that's black-pilled right there.
It sounds like the Johnson administration is in fief to one of the ruinous powers, to be honest.
Oh, yeah.
Papa Nurgle has gotten his hands into this.
Yeah. Just an incredible display. We are... I think the first time as an American to say, thank God I don't have to deal with the British health system.
Yeah, they've also decided to pass a package of laws which basically says the police can just arrest anyone and do anything they want at any time, which is good.
Wasn't this like straight from the plot from V for Vendetta? They had a plague, and then the government assumed emergency powers and just didn't give them up. Like, I always found V for Vendetta kind of trite and silly in how it depicted the authoritarianism, but I'll be damned if Boris Johnson doesn't want to make the Wachowskis into profits.
I mean, I think that is kind of a thing that is sort of revealing with these kind of like decaying, but kind of decaying imperial or former imperial powers, and with the United States and the UK, is that things do just get aggressively stupid as they die. So again, like China obviously is as kind of an emerging imperial power, although less emerging now. They're decently solidified.
Yeah.
They still kind of they can put the good mask on. They have the ability to like respond to the crisis in a way that looks good. Whereas, the United States and the UK it's kind of on their face, obvious just how incapable they are, and everyone can see it. But
let the devil take the hindmost. It will, purify the strain, and we'll all be better for it.
Yep.
Yeah. It is shocking. I guess it's not shocking, but it is notable the extent to which the American government's response to coronavirus has been motivated by fear of market effects.
Yeah, I mean, all they can do at this point is spectacle management. Like, there's a reason why all the fucking money in companies now is just in PR.
It makes me think of, so on Friday, Donald Trump went on, did a press conference where he announced that Google was making a website that would be used to track coronavirus cases or something. And so the markets rose because it sounded like he'd been working on a plan. But as soon as the markets closed for the day, it was revealed that no, that was just something he made up. And we've been seeing this a lot over the past week where, for example, there was a claim that no one would have, that everyone would have access to a testing facility, which isn't true. There was the claim that that people were going to receive the coronavirus vaccine without, even if they were uninsured, or treatment for coronavirus, even if they were uninsured, which is also not true.
Yep. He had a big press conference and met with all of the major insurance companies and said, yep, we're going to make sure that you're all going to be covered. And the insurers hastily clarified, no. We're only going to cover the test. You're still on the hook for the costs of treatment.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I mean, like, that's the biggest thing.
Or this emergency bill that they've been working on to try to give people paid sick leave if they test for coronavirus, apparently has so many exemptions in it that basically 80% of the American workforce is not covered under it.
Yes, it is. If you work for an employer which has more than 50 employees, but fewer than 5, or more than 50, but no, yeah, between 50 and 500 employees, you will receive free sick leave. But I'm not even sure if that mechanism that was recently passed into law. I'm not sure if it's been signed into law yet.
It still has to go through the Senate, and I highly doubt they're going to pass it because they're the Republicans, and they're just going to.
Oh, yeah.
And they, again, rather explicitly, it was the same thing they did in 08, and they're going to do it now, but worse, which is that ultimately they know that none of their base actually care. So even then,
who knows?
They might pass it, they might not, but
anything that
either way,
also be killed in reconciliation.
Yeah, plus, of course, it won't do very much, again, as clarified. It affects such a minimal segment of labor.
It needs to go through not just reconciliation, but the Congressional Budget Office. So it has to be budgeted as well as reconciled, and it's not going to be reconciled, and it's not going to be budgeted. This government can't pass laws. Like this, the fundamental, like, it's baked into the Constitution that we cannot pass laws.
There's an explanation that I've seen that's very good from Matt Christman, of course, of all people, but of course the United States was, designed as a very much an explicitly bourgeois republic, and it only functions as long as there's not vaguely ideologically coherent parties involved, because if there are vaguely ideological coherent parties, and the Republicans are pretty ideologically coherent, whereas the Democrats aren't, but if no one's willing to reach across the aisle and, again, do that kind of hash out a deal bullshit that people love, then nothing has to get done, because it was always kind of designed as a way for the bourgeois to mediate their conflicts. The president originally wasn't a publicly elected position, and neither was the Senate. It was never designed to be a democratic institution. It's just been bootstrapped into being that. And so, of course, yeah, the ability to actually pass laws, no, it lacks that as long as at least one of the parties has any idea of what they stand for. And the Republicans definitely do.
Yeah. And even as the Republicans stand for bourgeois, they stand for, the most extreme faction of the bourgeois, I mean, historically there's been this tendency that, there's been this tendency to like force capitalism to take its medicine. That's been a powerful faction within bourgeois government. Which is not present in the United States, certainly.
Yeah, overall, it's because the Republican Party's real base is the American petite bourgeois.
Mm-hmm.
Every just psychotic, reactionary fucking like owner of a company that installs HVAC or a fucking used boat dealership or something, just the most just psychotic, frothing at the mouth American reactionaries. And it's again very
constituency is Killdozer.
Yeah, well, and more importantly is that it used to be, even in the U.S., of course you had like the liberal Republicans and you had like Fox News and stuff. That was all the chum for the rubes. Whereas the quote-unquote intellectual conservatives had, the National Review and
AMF Buckley and Cato Institute.
Well, again, Cato to some degree, even that's for the rubes, but there was always a more accurate and clear-eyed ideological project for the quote-unquote intellectual conservatives, and then there was the bullshit for the chum for the rubes. And now most of the Republicans in Congress are the rubes. They are the people who, hell, fucking literally, there was that recent moment where Steve Mnuchin live on air called fucking Mad Money,
he
Cramer.
Called Jim Cramer. No one who understands the economy on any level gets their investing advice from Jim Cramer, right? He's a celebrity. He's like the Joe Rogan of investment. You know what I mean?
That would be a step up. He is the Dr. Phil of investment.
Okay, yeah, that's a good point. So, like, the idea that the Secretary of the Treasury is calling, no, I think even Dr. Phil, like Dr. Phil at least has like a serious demeanor. You know what I mean? Like he's not a doctor, but he plays one on TV.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of like an understanding for Jim Cramer, an example of like a comparison for what Steve Mnuchin calling Jim Cramer is like.
He's a shock jock.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. He's got like a hammer out. He's smashing mugs. He's like, bye. I watched CNBC a lot when I was like 9, which absolutely poisoned my brain. But I remember I would stay over at my grandparents' house, and my parents were like, "Don't watch cartoons," and I was like, "I'm watching the news, Mom. I'm watching the news." And so, absolutely rotted my brain with Jim Cramer. I didn't watch a lot of Jim Cramer, but I very much remember him. Anyway, digression aside, it's insane that.
But yeah, like they've gotten to the point fully where the inmates are running the asylum. They've gone from the cruel, sociopathic, and shitty, but effective conservatives who understood that, they had an ideological project of, managing the underclass and dealing with that and believed in that fully, to the people who, believe that, Obama was a Kenyan Muslim who was also a gay prostitute when in office. Like, I guarantee you there's multiple people in the Senate, in the House that believe that. It would be
incredibly cool if he was.
Yeah.
It would be very cool.
They keep trying to make Obama sound cooler than he actually is, and it's bringing me down.
I mean, but like, so what was that ideological project? I guess it would be like the neocons, like the Bush era.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the problem with that is like they were just so conclusively and just destroyed their legitimacy. You look at Powell. You look at Condoleezza Rice. You look at
Kristol,
Dick Cheney, David Petraeus. All those guys.
They made the mistake
absolutely
of when they could have ridden out all the shocks that came from fucking things up. What they made the mistake is they broke the core mission statement of the movement conservatism that they had allied themselves with when Bush passed the bank bailout. is that these were people who had this uneasy cooperation with the foaming at the mouth religious conservatives, the ideologue free marketers. And when the rubber hit the road, they said, no, we're going to do what is necessary in order to maintain some sort of liquidity in the financial system, even if it contradicts with the core values that we've been talking about for the past 20 years. And that is the genesis of the Tea Party, is this violent, rabid reaction to the idea that, oh no, there's a certain minimum standard of public good that the government has to uphold.
Or not even public good, just private good, right?
Yeah. We're just going to descend into anarchy, and not the fun kind.
Yeah, I mean, the bank bailout was a huge moment ideologically for conservatives because the problem is that the ideology isn't necessarily or wasn't necessarily grounded in pure naked evil all the time. The ideology was, you have to remember, it used to be that it would actually be more efficient, that it would be better if things were privatized, that it would be better if things were on the market, and so that we should support, free markets as an ideological principle because they get results. And when that hits the reality of these markets do not get results, the ideological principle doesn't hold. It really cut to the heart of what that conservative movement was founded on. Even going back to like Ronald Reagan and Margaret Thatcher.
Mm-hmm.
Well, ultimately,
the contradiction between the ideology and reality, they chose the ideology.
Yeah.
And it's also important to note that it always did work at least fine to some degree. It at least made them feel that way to, again, that kind of core base of, frothing at the mouth, reactionaries, small and medium business owners that are the Republican base. Because, they've always been fine throughout all of these things. And so, yeah, they could just float on that.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the big shock to that has always been the stock market crisis. And in the stock market crisis, that's when essentially the stuff that has been the deprivation that has been taking place in the real economy, often for months or even years beforehand, finally reaches the point where the image of the economy, the stock market, can no longer maintain the illusion of prosperity. And this is the interesting thing, is that they are so devoted to maintaining that image of prosperity that they do incredible things to maintain it. Like these repo operations, with the liquidity operations, the loosening regulations and cutting taxes and all this
Trump
stuff.
has suggested, making like almost a total suspension of the payroll tax, other sort of tax cuts, anything to try to keep the motor running.
Yeah,
but there's no gas left in the tank.
Yeah, and what we see that is the liquidity injections is the circuit of capital is how you go from M to C to M prime or C to M to C prime. It's the same thing. It's not the same thing, but it's very similar. Closely related concept. I'm sorry. And the liquidity. The problem with bank liquidity is that there's a gap there. There's a problem. This is my understanding. Is that there's a problem of moving capital and money, moving money into capital and moving capital into money, getting that cycle to move, because banks are worried about lending, or banks lack the underlying liquidity to purchase goods, and so the government has to step in, and the quantity of liquidity injections that we see is roughly what the difference between what the size of the gap in the circulation of capital. And when that reaches something like, it's $1.5 trillion, that's something that you need to take a look at.
Yeah, and notably, these repo operations are much longer than any previous ones. Usually, they're like overnight or 48 hours. The first batch of ones that they're doing is a month-long one. They also have like a 2 or 3 month-long operation where they're basically, the Fed is purchasing assets and giving these people a very long time to buy them back, and they can use that cash in the meantime to try to keep lending moving.
Which is an incredible moment, because so traditionally stock buybacks take place overnight. So the theory goes that the bank has the assets. They simply need to make an overnight loan because they're using they're leveraged over, like at the end of the trading day they're leveraged, so they need to. That's right?
Yep.
So they have the assets. They just don't. They're just not liquid. They can't easily transform the assets into money. So they take an overnight loan to keep their balance sheets balanced, and then they pay it back in the morning. You take a loan at 5, you pay it back at 9.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that these loans are going for longer than one night is extremely, 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 extremely dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
That is a bad, like that is, I don't know how to put that. That is like, that should be very much a warning sign, because what it implies is that these banks do not have the non-liquid assets to back up the loans, which means that these banks are taking on debt to the federal government at this point, which they cannot service, or they may be able to service, but they cannot pay back. Is that wrong?
It's a very much a possibility. Like when it comes time to buy them back, if their assets have depreciated further, if they are still in dire straits, they won't be able to buy them back.
Which would very much be a moment of. This is when things would get very interesting in the American financial sector, I have to say. And this is sort of part of this long running. So what happened over the past week is these liquidity injections had not just tightened up the circuit of capital. They had injected a lot of liquidity into the markets, which means that they had made a lot of stocks trade at a higher rate. So they'd been trading faster, which equates to a demand increase, which means that the prices of the stocks had increased. So when as the markets began to slow, as people began to sell off, the prices of the stocks searched for their real price, or searched for their real value, which was substantially lower than the face value of the stock. So, go ahead.
I do just want to say that I also think it's important to remember about this whole I don't know how much it's affected the Fed by now, but I wouldn't be surprised, is that it is important to clarify that, as we saw with, again, fucking the Treasury Secretary calling the Med money, increasingly the right wing, especially over the past 10, 20 years, have become psychotic market ideologues. And I think a big chunk of the reason for their complete and utter and kind of obvious panic is that I recall there was a statement by, I need to double check the person, but one of the higher up people responsible for kind of the response to this in the Trump administration, saying they thought they think that the market would do more, and that they want to maintain people's relationship with their healthcare providers in this time and stuff like that. And I think when it comes to just, again, a massive liquidity injection, just in general, even at the Fed, at this point, all of these people are completely psychotic market ideologues who, regardless of the effects it has, I think kind of have a disconnect from reality. And I can imagine that right now a lot of them are panicking because they think that they truly do believe more than anything that an unfettered market, of course, will work and do everything correctly. And so, yeah, there's a lot of panic and screaming about why that's not happening, because ideologically they're incapable of comprehending it.
Yeah, we saw the CDC guy talking about that. Was it Wednesday when he said something like, "It's weird the private sector has not been proactive on this issue." There's an there's a underlying the ideology, or underlying these activities that they're doing is not is an incredible massive malice, but it's also an ideological expectation that
of course they're really good at making heart pills and dick pills for me, a piece of shit boomer.
Speaking of which, this podcast is sponsored by Blue Chew.
Hell yeah.
I have a point to make about that, which is that all those companies have just started going under. The mattress one, all those guys who have been sponsoring half the podcasts have
Yeah,
Sweet.
It's a business model that makes no money and sells completely useless items.
who could have guessed that running a series of gigantic podcast subsidies funded by oil, trillionaires wasn't
Yeah,
an
funded by
economically
a Japanese shell bank for the Saudi sovereign wealth fund.
who could have guessed that having that act as a gigantic podcast subsidy wouldn't be a sustainable business model?
Although that is like when you trace that line, that is hilarious. Like all these big podcasts are like backed by like like Saudi Arabia or something.
It's the funniest possible thing that that there's. I don't know if it's behind the specific ones that they advertise, but the fact that there's probably a direct line of cash from Saudi Arabia to keeping Cumtown operational is beautiful. We live in a global market.
Yeah, this is globalization. This is what the neoliberals wanted.
Yep.
So you're saying that I have to thank Mohammed bin Salman for the fucking Raid Shadow Legends spam?
Yes,
absolutely.
Probably.
Glorious. Yeah. So, in other words, we have to support the Houthis in order to defeat
advertising, shitty podcast advertising. Yeah.
When you break it down like that, like we can talk about the economy in economic terms, but when you break it down like that, it really is just so fucking stupid. Just remarkably stupid.
That's another guy. Speaking of Mohammed bin Salman, Crown Prince of Saudi Arabia. So now the whole world is following like Saudi royal internal drama, like it's Game of Thrones or something. And
we've worn out on the whole Meghan Markle.
Oh yeah.
Stuff.
No, because if you're gonna,
we want a little bit less sex and more violence and intrigue in our royal drama.
Pay attention to royals, right? Are you gonna pay attention to the guy who occasionally goes to cricket games, or the guy who can have people executed with a sword, right?
True.
Like
that's true. That is one a lot more exciting.
One of these stories involves like fast cars, gold-plated AK-47s, weird secret sites way out in the desert, billions of dollars funding radical terrorism for unknown reasons, and a web of money linking the entire world. And the other one, you've got some guy in a red suit, like.
Well, yeah, I mean that
some old pederast who's in Epstein's notebook.
Yeah. That is the fun thing about the Saudis, is that although royalty, they are truly new money in every way. Like, they're not yet, of course, although they are part of, the global pedophile Illuminati. Mm-hmm. They're not, they don't have that kind of like generations of experience with it. And so, they're still at least able to spend their money in very evil and cool ways. And they have, giant skyscrapers built by slaves instead of...
They still have palace in Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
Those only exist for other monarchies on the pages of National Enquirer, because we've run out of interesting news from our own actor and music aristocracy. We have to import juicy bits of news from Great Britain.
Yeah.
Which, with
Dude, imagine if the Queen gets coronavirus. Imagine if the Queen gets coronavirus. Like they just all get coronavirus.
And also, they all are. It's not really importing, because the ruling class, they don't really have a country in any real way. There's a reason why, every single one of them was fucking flying with our boy Jeffrey.
There's a reason every ship is flagged from Liberia. Every bank account is every business is headquartered in Delaware. All their ships are flagged in Liberia, and all their
accounts are
owners are legally citizens of Trinidad and Tobago.
God.
Though, speaking of Saudi Arabia, we should talk about oil prices.
We should talk about oil prices.
Also, can I just say before one kind of, I guess, I don't know, closing or more opening statement about coronavirus? Because it was pretty fucking bad in China, and for those listeners in the U.S. Or continental Europe as well, or the UK, is that it's barely started, and right now a lot of people are, of course, nervous and feared, and because that's kind of been the passive state for a lot of people over the past, 12 or so years. Being more nervous and scared is kind of the response. A lot of people think that kind of this is how bad it gets, and it's gonna get really, really fucking bad. And people as a community, with the people the people that you support, and the people that support you are going to have to learn how to deal with death in a kind of way that I don't think the U.S. has really ever seen. A country that's never been bombed except for by like 3 Japanese seaplanes, and even the low end estimates of death for the United States are in the hundreds of thousands if we get lucky. Things are going to get bad, and yeah, you need to stand together with the people and deal with it in the best way that you can.
Yeah, absolutely. It's going to be very, very it's going to be very, very rough. It's going to be people, like a lot of people are going to die. I mean, I don't want to like name statistics that I've seen, because that just seems kind of like I'm not an epidemiologist. But the American government has just truly betrayed its people. And as much as we like to make fun of like Trump voting boomers, it is a truly horrific betrayal of trust.
Yeah,
for those
on
people.
a scale that's not been seen in any of our lifetimes.
Yeah. I've never seen. I can't think of another time in history when a government has decided to willfully accept the decimation of its voting base, of its base.
I think the only thing that I can think of is the American Civil War, where President James Buchanan, at every step of the way, aided and abetted the move towards insurrection and civil war by the southern states.
Maybe.
And a conflagration that resulted in the deaths of 600,000 to 1 million people, depending on how you count it.
Depending on whether or not you count slave owners as people.
That's true. That's an important philosophical question.
Yeah, and I also think it is important to really say that I get what you're saying, but ultimately, the United States, was, again, even in its founding, was, like I mentioned earlier, never a true democracy. It has always been, and continues to be a bourgeois state for the bourgeois. And ultimately, as we've seen, it has kind of done its job in protecting them. It's been desperately trying to keep financial markets going. And it is, going to betray and abandon. I shouldn't even say abandon, because ultimately the working people of both, the United States territorially and anywhere else in the world were always the people it was supposed to crush. And all we can do is act in solidarity to minimize the deaths as the bourgeois state does its job and lets the poor, the weak, and the old die in order to protect the hoarded wealth of limited few.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's very difficult to deal with such a grave subject with anything but just absolute solemnity.
Yeah.
Because we were talking about, hundreds of thousands of people, many of them cut down in the prime of their life by an invisible enemy that they can't see, they can't fight. And all the while, the people who are supposed to watch out for those things, people who beat the war drums about national defense all the time, keeping the Americans safe, the one time where they actually had a chance to actually defend people in this country and, make good on all of that years of, propaganda about how we're keeping you safe in an unsafe world. They just fundamentally had no desire to do anything about it because it would cost too much.
Yeah, because ultimately for them, what national defense always meant was selling automatic weapons and armored vehicles. And right now, in this time, their quote-unquote national defense is going to be figuring out how to avoid doing as much research and development as they can into how to deal with problems, and then charging as much as they can for any solutions and denying it to as many people as possible.
Yeah.
Because that, costs money. And in an even broader sense, like, even when it comes to anything related to the conspiracism about the virus, some people speculating, and I don't think it is, but whether it's a bioweapon or not, or all of these things.
That's
It's
the
a- it's
natural reaction to the kind of betrayal that they're feeling that they can't put into words.
it's important to remember that it doesn't matter whether it doesn't actually matter in general. A lot of those conspiracies, it's important to remember that it doesn't matter whether it's a bioweapon or not, just in the same way that almost with any conspiracy, it doesn't matter whether
Mhm.
it's true or not, because if it is a bioweapon, then what do you have to do to prevent something like it from happening again? Strip power from the bourgeois. If it's not a bioweapon, and we're going to end up with a lot of people dead because of the completely horrendous response on behalf of, the medical field owned and operated by them, what do you have to do to deal with that? Strip power from the bourgeois. No
Yeah.
matter what it is, a vast majority of the suffering from this will be caused exclusively because, so a bunch of rich cokeheads can go around and fly around on, Jeffrey fucking Epstein's airplane. That's why people you know and love are going to die, so they can continue to do that. And there's only one way to stop it. Fucking parody redacted.
Yeah, I can only agree. It's
I would like to take a moment to talk about something I find very disturbing, and that's the anti-doomers.
yes,
The people who you find them on social. My Facebook is filled with people who are.
it's nothing more than the flu.
Mhm.
You're not gonna stop me from living. Did you see that post on Twitter? Someone was like, "You're not gonna stop me from living my life," and they were going to Red Robin at 5 o'clock in the afternoon. Like,
Fucking Red Robin.
like really? You decided that you are going to, in the face of disease, you've decided to live your life, and you went to fucking Red Robin. Like, this is what Americans are going to die for.
For a lot of people in America, there's never actually been a real. You occasionally have issues, minor issues, but there's never really been there's been a sense of slow falling over the past, 12 years in a lot of cases, but kind of nothing's ever mattered. There's a reason people talk about, it's all kind of been the same day since, fucking 2008 or 2016 or whatever. There's just very little has really truly happened on a fundamental level suddenly. It's kind of just been the slow grinding poverty that was kind of to some degree always at the base of this country, just getting worse and worse and worse. And people don't really have the ability to comprehend the idea that, there can just be a punch in the gut anymore. It's always just been a slow grind. And I think a lot of people can't comprehend the idea of the rug just being pulled out from under them.
Yeah, if we had one of our Lacanians on here, they would say it's a contact with the traumatic real.
I mean, yeah, it is. I think we've been living in the fucking spectacle. Like I said earlier, all the fucking, business shitheads, all they do anymore is spectacle management. There's a reason why PRs, the only fucking field that's exploding. That's all they've been kind of trying to do is the real underlying guts of the economy, the real human condition, obviously, has been getting worse and worse and worse, but all they can do is sit around and fucking, try and make it so that, fucking having to do, become a fucking private car driver is now, instead of, being kind of explicitly a job servitude, it's a choice. It's options. It's all options and freedom, and they've kind of been able to manage that spectacle, but the disease just outright kills people. There's no fucking, you can't spectacle a fucking, pile full of bodies that you're about to set a torch to. There's no spectacle you can manage for that. And so that is kind of the real reason for a lot of their panic about this as well. It's because, with the fucking 08 housing collapse and the obviously, kind of destruction of any sort of firm foundation for labor at all, the increased insecurity, you can always manage the spectacle of all of those things. But because people will live and the deaths will be done in abstract ways of, people blowing their brains out and opioid overdoses, and it can all be abstracted and spectacleized, but you can't abstract and spectacleize, a fucking National Guard soldier, fucking pouring gasoline over 100 bodies to fucking light them on fire so it doesn't get anybody else more infected.
Yeah.
There's no way to spectacleize that.
Mm-hmm. You can't even sell them a gun to make them feel safe like they have for every other perceived threat to their safety.
There is no more way to avoid and run away from the traumatic, horrifying real. And that's why all these business shitheads who have not given a shit or have even actively supported it, if they kill a fucking 250,000 people from drug overdoses or suicide or whatever, they're fucking fine with that. But if they have to deal with the same numbers from something like this, they can't run away from that happening. It's a fucking played out quote, and it's something that probably gets said all too often, but even though, as we're hopefully going to clarify soon, that this isn't necessarily the big collapse, although it very much could be. Decades where nothing happens, weeks where decades happen.
Yep. Yeah. It's like every sporting event, don't call it until it's over.
Yeah. I do think I think people it's very serious. It's a very serious situation. And there's absolutely bad things going to happen. But I think people have this image of it as the end of the world. They're thinking, but the coronavirus does end, and it's not, it may be very different. Obviously, I may be completely wrong here. We may be back in December or not December, in April or May, and it's so much worse than this. But eventually, this is going to pass, and the people who have survived are going to have to work out what happened and face the future. And I don't think that ultimately, I don't think too much is going to change. I don't think the coronavirus is going to be able to engender any kind of response in these institutions to the extent where the kinds of reforms that need to take place can actually take place, unless like Joe Biden gets it and Bernie Sanders becomes nominee by default. You know what I mean? And even then, right? Like it would take every not to put too much on Bernie Sanders, but I mean like every American Congress person would have to die, and then Trump would have to die. All of the coronavirus, and they'd have to, you know what I mean? Like it would just be a ridiculous situation.
I mean, given how they've so far handled the very obvious fact that Trump has coronavirus and they're just pretending that he doesn't, who knows? Why not?
Well, the thing is that even if Trump has it, it's not sure that he dies of it. Even just because,
of course,
like even if everyone in Congress gets coronavirus, not everyone is going to become incapacitated from it or die of it.
Yeah, of course. I'm exaggerating, of course, but
so I also don't think that this. I think the stock market is oversold, but the triggers have yet to really pop off. Like those are oil companies going under in a big way, which may still happen. We'll try and figure this out with a little chat about oil. But the liquidity crisis has gotten very big, but it hasn't gotten so big that it hasn't disrupted the government can still put money into that and pour money into that hole. So I think I at this point I think that the actual real crash is going to be later this year.
Yeah. After all, we're kind of in new territory about how long this epidemic is going to take to fully play out.
Yeah, and also what the oil war between Saudi Arabia and somebody is going to look like.
I mean, ultimately, even though the coronavirus might not directly be the cause of the collapse, ultimately the duration that it takes, like the amount of people that it killed, like the knock-on effects that it could have could be
immense, especially with regards to demand. It's a demand shock.
It'll be like obviously very serious, and just because again, like minimum low-end estimates are still in the hundreds of thousands, but some of the higher-end estimates, if it lasts for like 6 months, and you get to some of the higher-end estimates in like the millions, then maybe it kind of more directly causes it. But either way, I think there's no way in which this is kind of a good thing to throw on to the current series of bubbles that our economic system is built on right now.
No, absolutely not. And the extent to which the economic system is built on sort of lies is very, is important to keep in mind. That one it's a big, like, sort of a shell game, and as soon as things just start to pop off,
Yeah,
yeah.
just because obviously, but when it comes to the oil money,
We should
oil,
talk about what actually
either
we're coming up on our time, but we should talk
oil-backed
about what.
bonds or so. Can I just say real quick that yeah, oil-backed bonds or Saudi oil money are behind. You find oil money in basically every segment of the economy, and especially in venture capital. A vast majority of what is kind of claimed now to be this new growing economy is just hemorrhaging money, and it's basically being propped up by oil money. And if the oil money goes, suddenly all the bullshit that's the Silicon Valley the tech future,
Yeah.
all of that.
Oil prices are down basically 40%.
Yeah,
And
they dropped as low as $25 for West Texas International, which is incredible.
Yeah, and Goldman Sachs is predicting potentially drops to a $20 a barrel price floor.
And this is important for everyone, not just because oil prices are going to be cheap, but because this severely impacts the profitability of companies that make and that extract oil, and these companies are not fiscally stable they're not fiscally stable as such.
Fracking, especially, is the profit margins on fracking are already dog shit.
Mm-hmm.
It's capital intensive, and the rewards have never been good. It basically only exists because of oil prices significantly higher than they are right now, and then subsidies, and with the collapse in oil prices, because fracking was obviously a big element of the expansion for a lot of petrochemical companies, because
it was I've looked into, I think we've talked about this before on the show, but they if you go deep into fracking, it's complete bullshit. If you go into like what they promise people.
Yeah, I think it was you, I recall, talking about.
Really walk back all of their promises about it.
Yeah.
I believe, one of you on a previous one talked about how even something as simple as like the press releases have gone from pretty hard scientific data like 10 to 20 years ago about oil extraction to just babbling stuff written by somebody on a fucking mountain of blow about how AI is gonna fucking like increase their yields with AI technology and cloud
blockchain to find new fracking plays or whatever.
Yeah, which obviously none of these things mean anything at all. They've just
Well, they've certainly spewed a whole lot of radioactive waste across the United States.
Yeah,
we've got a low-key Chernobyl going.
Yeah, things are great. We love to see it.
So I think there's some other stuff like Bernie Sanders is got completely destroyed by Joe Biden. But I think what's interesting.
No, completely. This is something that I've kind of been following, and people have pointed out that electorally, Obama was in 2008. Obama was in a worse position than Sanders is now in 2008. So I wouldn't say electorally destroyed. I do think that they're like gone to the head annihilation of every other centrist, and climbing onto Biden has been rather effective. But they face two problems, which is that Joe Biden very clearly has dementia, and they recently tried to do a live stream with him. It lasted for 4 minutes. He mumbled something about like giving $20 billion to Bolsonaro to stop burning the Amazon, and then literally wandered off screen.
Yeah, it was about coronavirus, and he didn't even talk about it.
Yeah, and he literally wandered off screen.
Yeah,
we
have seen this stuff. Like, we have seen like candidates rise and fall in this cycle, and we saw that in 2016 as well on the Republican side.
But the bigger problem is electorally is that with Sanders is that I think in any sort of like honest election he would win, but as people have already pointed out, in a lot of the states where Biden won, generally Biden was 10 to 15 points off exit poll wise in favor of Biden, which is highly suspicious. Kind of the international standard is if an election, if the final vote's more than like 5% off of exit polling, usually that's a decent indicator that like you need to go through and check for fraud. And in most of the cases, things were, like I said, more than 10 points off for Biden. And
Yeah.
it's particularly off in areas where votes were machine counted.
Yeah.
And even then, if Sanders wins, I don't.
Like, what does he do? You know what? You can't pass laws in the American government. What's he gonna? How's he gonna? You know, I hate to say how are you gonna pass it, but the truth is that none of these candidates are going to be able to pass anything that isn't the most degenerate pro-bourgeois.
And in addition, as I pointed out earlier, is that most of the reactionaries in the American government by now, the FBI especially, as well, is riddled with these types. Most of them are full-on frothing at the mouth, like, they think Nancy Pelosi is a Maoist type of people.
Mhm.
And even within the CIA, which is, the kind of the more blue-blooded, aristocratic, fucking old money organization, I guess, fucking Skull and Bones, Yale, Princeton, all that.
Yeah.
Obviously, they've had no issue over the decades of assassinating anyone who, in their opinion, if you think about doing land reform, you're basically, the second coming of Stalin. Even if Sanders manages to get past a lot of the blatant electoral rigging,
You think they're just gonna kill him?
it's a very real possibility, especially because he's older and he's already had,
They'll use the CIA heart attack gun.
Yeah, he's already had a minor heart attack. All they need to do is, slip him something, give him a fucking heart attack, and be like, oh, damn, whoops, that's crazy. Ultimately, that's the biggest problem with Sanders. I think he's been obviously useful in kind of focusing a lot of energy from a lot of, a new generation that kind of had nothing to follow on in relation to socialist organizing. There was kind of a complete, gap in the 80s
There
and 90s.
still is. I mean, there's like,
yeah, of course there's a gap, but people are, there's at least an idea of something else now. Like there kind of was no future outside of, end of history shit for a while. There's at least an idea of something else. But
my God.
In regards to Sanders, I don't see how we can get through. A lot of the blatant electoral rigging in the DNC, and then even then, I don't see how any of the organizations of the American state, either the blue blood old money reactionary organization with the CIA, or the kind of new money frothing at the mouth reactionaries of the FBI, or obviously the official legislative and judicial branch. I don't see how any of those organizations allow him to do anything.
I'm reminded of something I read about Nelson Mandela once. Someone said, the anarchists and the communists and the socialists went out for Nelson Mandela, and Nelson Mandela never went out for the anarchists or communists or socialists, which is, I think, a good idea of how, how the left should look at electoral politics. That it's, are you supporting a or is that politician supporting you?
Yeah, and I do think with
obviously, we're not, that doesn't. That's a line about Mandela that you can take way further than you should. But it's important to think about the value of what the value of going out and supporting a candidate who will never go out for you is.
I think we got a really good example, Elizabeth Warren.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, anyone, frankly, in my opinion at least,
everyone should have seen it coming.
Yeah, she's almost been for like her entire life a reactionary, and especially I'm from the Midwest. Every fucking family in the Midwest, your fucking 70-year-old sundowning grandparent says that you had a fucking like Cherokee great fucking in the family tree. You don't believe that unless you're either a fucking rube or you're trying to justify some sort of career advancement.
And it looks like in Warren's career advancement.
Yep, it worked very well for her. She's an opportunist.
What's her name? There was an older teacher at Princeton talking to Slavoj Žižek and basically talking about how Warren, her entire thing was to destroy sort of any progressive or left elements in the law curriculum that were left. And she was, always kind of a naked careerist. She said she's a capitalist to her bones. Her problem, the Republicans, and she's always been clear about this, was that in the 90s they stopped managing the bourgeois state well, in her opinion. That's always been her issue with them. And anybody who, thought she was on the left in any way it's a case of people deciding based on some vague intuition or feeling over the stated beliefs and constant actions of somebody over their entire life.
But no, she's Hermione Granger, made real.
God, I do fucking hate liberals so much. Jesus.
Read another book. This has been a public service announcement.
Not even that. Just the fucking idea that politicians... It's so reflective of America that they believe a politician's main goal is to be your friend. They don't owe you anything, and they're just kind of supposed to be a reflection of, what makes you feel good. Which is just, it's so revealing about how they view communal action. Which is
Mr. Deeds goes to Washington without the conflict in the story.
Yep.
Yeah. I guess before we finish up, we should just say just a few words about the oil price war, because I think that is gonna be important. So Mohammed bin Salman and a couple of other, so basically OPEC Plus, which is an organization of OPEC and some other countries like I think it's Russia and Ecuador, have essentially broken up, and they're no longer acting as a cartel on oil prices. And that's significant because the cartel prices on oil were pretty much one of the only things. It's pretty much one of the only things keeping oil prices at where oil is profitable.
That is a fucking marketing ass name, by the way. Can I just say that? OPEC Plus. If you like OPEC, you'll enjoy OPEC Plus.
Yep. So it's not only sustained profitability for oil companies, but it's also enabled the largesse that keeps these Persian Gulf and Arab Peninsula states from being able to buy off internal conflict.
Yeah. But so the problem that they've been having is that a subsidy for American oil is because the U.S. is not part of OPEC. So they don't have to play by OPEC's rules, but they do benefit from the lower supply from their competitors. So I think Saudis are actually going to war with America here. I think there's no. I mean, the Saudi Arabia isn't competing with Russia. Started competing with Ecuador, right? This is a Saudi-Russian price war, and I think to some extent it is. But fundamentally, this is because Mohammed bin Salman wants to take out American oil.
Yeah, and because a big issue with it is, I don't know how true this still is. I'd assume it is, but obviously, Saudi crude's always been of generally higher quality than a lot of other places. Requires a lot less money to be put into refining, and especially when compared to American crude, because obviously a lot of American and North American in general efforts.
Fracked oil is actually very, very high quality.
But it's still very capital intensive due to.
Oh, you mean like not in terms of the quality of the product? You mean in terms of like?
In terms of, the amount of money that you need to put into it. It's per every unit of oil outputted, every unit of fuel that you can sell. It's a lot more expensive here in the United States than it is in Saudi Arabia, which obviously that's why they're able to build giant slave cities. And ultimately, obviously, given the fact that all of the American oil companies have basically staked their future on fracking, which, as I've said, has been incredibly. It's a very, very, very expensive way to produce oil. Oil prices going down hit American oil companies who are reliant on fracking incredibly hard.
I wonder if the Saudis have sort of seen the writing on the wall and they want to position themselves to be the last people producing oil.
It could be.
Yeah. It depends on it depends on what kind of game they're playing ultimately, just because obviously we don't, I think, know enough about MBS, whether he's kind of shrewd or
get
just
him on
a
the
fucking
podcast.
idiot. Hell yeah.
Maybe he'll give us a sponsorship.
Yeah.
Hell yeah.
There's nothing Mohammed bin Salman likes more than he's actually a listener. He donated to on our Patreon. He's the highest level.
God. Fucking. Ugh. But,
I guess that's
there's a lot of things that are happening, and all we can right now, for the past like 4 to 12 years, I think, depending on how you want to look at it, Wile E. Coyote has, run off the edge and has been spinning his legs, and
Mhm.
these past few days might have finally, I think it's a very real possibility that we finally hit the moment where he's looked down. And I think it's very safe to say that the next year, I'll say that, is going to be interesting in every possible sense. Yeah, there's just been kind of, one shitty day and one kind of slow grinding.
Yeah.
The world getting worse since 2008 to some degree, and then 2016 more intensely. And that's finally cracking. Things are going to start happening, and a lot of them are going to be bad, but no stasis can last forever.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. The times they are changing. I guess that's going to be it.
Yep. You can follow us all on Twitter to find out which stocks you want to short next.
All right.